Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first Your Kids Next Read Author Talk. My name is Allison Tait. I am a middle grade author. I am an admin of the Your Kids Next Read group, and I'm extremely happy to have you here with us all this evening. More happy to have the wonderful and spectacular Amie Kaufman here with us this evening. However, before we get to the excitement of the introduction of Amie, I've got a little bit of housekeeping I need to do. If you are watching the stream and you would like to comment, can you please click the StreamYard link, which is in the post. If you click that, it will allow us to see who you are when you're commenting. You're just giving StreamYard permission to see your Facebook username. Otherwise, all we see is Facebook user, and it gets very, very confusing about who's asking any questions. So click the link and allow us in. Say hello so that we know you're there, because otherwise Amie and I feel like we're talking to each other, which is fine. Like, face it.
We do that all night, but we shouldn't.
We shouldn't do that. Anyway, so here she is. Here's Amie. She is a New York Times and internationally best-selling author of young adult fiction. Her multi-award-winning work is in publication or slated for publication in more than 30 countries. She has YA series including the Illumini Files, the Aurora Cycle, the Other Side of the Sky duology, the Starbound trilogy, the Unearthed duology, and her middle grade. I know, we could go on. And
it doesn't belong to me.
The Elementals trilogy. Her work is in development for film and TV, has taken home multiple Aurealis Awards, an Arbia, a Gold Inky. It's made multiple best of lists, and she's been shortlisted for the Prime Minister's Literary Award. So, you know, we are in excellent present here, people. And tonight we are here in the Your Kids Next Read Facebook community to celebrate the launch of Battleborn, the third and final book in Amie's best-selling middle grade Elementals trilogy. So to tell us more about it, I'm going to get Amie to show you. She's going to be the barrel girl here for us this evening. Are you ready? And she is going to show us all of the books and give us a little bit of a brief rundown and overview of the series. So take it away, Amie.
I am. And I'm going to be very careful throughout the whole hour not to offer any spoilers. So don't worry if you haven't read the books yet. Hopefully we will tempt you and you will not know how they end. So book 1 is Ice Wolves. Nice and close. Book 2, Scorched Dragons. Book 3, the red and the blue are together for Battleborn.
Ooh.
So what is this series about? This series is for you if you like any of the following, really. Wolves, dragons, shapeshifters, twins, school feasts, magical inventions, the fact that I got to go to Iceland to get inspired, I think is what I called it when I was texting it, for the setting. It's a series that I wrote for young me, because I was one of those kids who read under the covers. And I had a whole system where I'd have, one hand on the light switch in the book. And I've confirmed recently with my mother after she tuned into a broadcast that she did in fact know I was doing this, but I did not. I thought that I was being very secretive at the time. And I still remember the absolute thrill of slipping away into those worlds. And I wrote this book for the me who used to read under the covers and slip away into other worlds. And what I tried to do with it is create something that will make, if you are a grown-up, make you feel like the you that used to do that. And if you are a kid, then introduce you to that pleasure. So it's a book that's about found families a lot, and it's a book about finding your friends and finding your people. And I suppose particularly relevant right now, it's a series that is mostly about rethinking the prejudices you might have, and it's about rethinking maybe beliefs that you thought were facts about other people that are not.
And did you know that it was going to be about that as you were writing it, or is that the kind of thing that sort of comes out in your writing as the world develops?
No, it very much came out as the world developed. I did not know that this was the sort of story I was writing. And when I looked back, I don't know how I didn't know that. But I spent 10 years working as a mediator, and that's where my education is. I have a master's in conflict resolution, and I used to teach mediation. And I'm really, really passionate about the fact that no matter what people's disagreements are, if you can get them in a room and get them really listening, if you can get them letting down the barriers and taking a second look and seeing things from someone else's point of view, you can really change the way they see the world and the way they see each other. It's not that easy to do, but if you can do it, magic happens. And I realized as I was writing this that was what this series was about, that this series was about the power of the individual to change the world and the importance of the individual rethinking all the things they thought they knew. But
Oh, it sounds like a book for our times.
I mean, I wish it wasn't. I wish it wasn't so timely. And obviously I started writing it in about 2015, 2016, so a long time ago now. And I didn't know what it was about until I thought I'd just written a great adventure that I really loved, and I handed it into my editor, who came back and said, "Oh, wow, you've written a political activism series. This is great." I went, "Sorry, have I?" And, well, yeah. This bit's about protest, and this bit's about communication across sort of party lines, and this bit, I was like, okay, yeah. I mean, I guess I wouldn't have worked as a mediator for a decade if I hadn't really believed that one of the most fundamental and important things that we can do is let down our guard and see things from other people's point of view without defending ourselves. So I suppose in retrospect, it's probably not a huge shock that I did.
It's fascinating though, isn't it, how that works? Like how you're writing this rollicking tale with all of the stuff and things going on, and then out of your subconscious is coming all of these things that you're preoccupied with. I find it fascinating how that works.
We do. And I mean, I think all authors do that, don't they? Like all authors have, I mean, we all have themes that we come back to over and over again. And we all, I think, sometimes we set out to write something rich in theme and message, but more often than not, I think we're quite surprised by it.
Yes, startled even when someone says, well, I found this an interesting metaphor for blah, blah. And you go,
yeah,
of course it was. Yes, that's exactly what it was.
Yes, I am very clever. You are correct.
All right. Now I can see lots of people are coming on in over here to say hello. Hello, Tanya and Nicole and Belinda. I just wanted to say again, if you can remember to click on the StreamYard permission so we can see who you are, that would be great. Otherwise, you come up looking like this as Facebook user, whereas if you give StreamYard permission, you too could be like Allison Rushby. Hello, Allison Rushby.
Oh, hello, Allison. I was about to say, well, if we can't see the name, we could just make them up, but I feel like that's just going to entertain people. It won't be any kind of incentive to help out at all.
I'm not sure that we have enough time to be making up all of those character names tonight. I don't know about you, but it takes me a little bit longer than that.
I mean, they could all be Murgatroyd, just every one of them.
All right, so exciting news. As regular visitors to the Facebook community will know, we have 3 sets of the Elementals trilogy to give away, thanks to HarperCollins. And as notified in the group, the first 2 sets are going to go to those members who submitted Amie's 2 favourite pre-submitted questions. So we're going to begin with those 2 questions because we're going to give away the two of those sets up front. All right, so brace yourselves, people. Here it comes. Our first winner is, and you need to prepare yourself to answer this question.
I was just thinking I should have thought about my answers, but I was just excited by the questions.
Our first winner is Rebecca Cameron. Hello, Rebecca Cameron, and well, congratulations. And Rebecca's question, was there a conscious reason for you choosing Anders to be the ice wolf, the cool element, and Raina to be the scorched dragon, the hot, fiery element, rather than the other way around, which is a great question.
It is. It is a great question. And actually, the reason I chose it is I've never been asked before. So I thought, when you talk about your books a lot, you get really excited when you hear questions that are really good ones that you haven't been asked before. So in this series, we've got the 2 different groups of shapeshifters. We've got the Ice Wolves and the Scorched Dragons. And the Ice Wolves are very organized. They're very, very loyal. I suppose their finer qualities are that they think things through. They're very loyal. They take care of everyone in the group. Their more challenging qualities sometimes are that there is a bit of groupthink and they can be loyal to the point of not questioning things that they should. And the Scorched Dragons are very artistic, very, very impulsive, very creative. And perhaps, their drawback is that they can be a bit too individualistic. They sometimes don't, think of the group as much as they should. But these two tribes used to work together to create magical artifacts. So the ice wolves, a little more thoughtful and a little more, willing to spend time in the library doing the research and the science and the thoughtful stuff, would sort of create the combinations of runes that you needed to forge onto these magical objects. And the scorched dragons would forge them using their magical fire and bring the artistic flair to it. And so both of those things, both of their skill sets were needed in order to create these artifacts together. They've now been at war for 10 years as the book opens, so there have been no artifact repairs, everything's starting to break, and nobody trusts anybody and nobody ever will again, as far as they're concerned. And Anders and Raina are a pair of twins, and on their 12th birthday, they attend the trial of the staff, which is where you check if you have the blood that will help you transform. And the absolutely unthinkable happens. He turns into a wolf and she turns into a dragon. And there is no such thing as a wolf and a dragon in the same family. It's not possible. And chaos ensues, which is a pretty good description of most of my books. So Anders is the wolf. He's trying to join the community, that is all about loyalty and that is all about discipline and is all about looking after everyone. And, hot-headed Raina is very appropriately off to the community of individuals. And I did think really hard about which one of them I wanted to turn into which, and which one I wanted the boy to turn into, and which one I wanted the girl to turn into. And I mean, it's a story about a pair of twins, but, we stick with Anders, and he is not the dominant twin. He's the follower. He's the one who always doubts himself, who always second guesses himself, who always wonders if he's done the right thing. And so I wanted to put him in this community where he is being called to be loyal, and he's being called to conform, and he's being called not to challenge anyone. But in return for that, he's being promised, we will take care of you. We will do everything that we need to and that we can to protect you and to keep you safe, and we will guide you. And because he's so underconfident, those are things that really, speak to him. And then we have Raina, who is being offered everything she's ever wanted: independence and, the chance to, to be herself and to do anything that she wants. But of course, to do that, they have to be enemies. And to do that, a lot of tricky things need to happen that I'll leave for the book. But I think, we so often see the setup where the girl is the calm, sensible one who's saying, oh, ought we do that? And perhaps we shouldn't. And the boy is the one dashing off to have a fierce adventure. And I always like to flip these things. I think it's always interesting to see what happens if you switch them around, and if you give the boy those sort of softer, gentler qualities, and you give the girl those harder, more daring qualities. So it was a very deliberate decision. And I don't know, I think it's something that I do in all of my books. In all of my books, I once I've written them, I look at the gender of every character and I try them with a different gender, just to see what I've done, to see if I've played into stereotypes. And sometimes I leave them switched. But in this case, Anders and Raina were always as they were from day one.
From the start. So you had the characters like fully realized in your mind before you started writing the story. Is that how you tend to work?
I did, and much more than usual. Usually I do a lot more discovery as I'm writing. And this time the twins just really showed up. They really showed up early on. But I do remember at one point, quite early on, I used to have in the before times writing dates in the city with other groups of friends. We'd go to the state library and we would write together and have lunch. And at lunch we would help each other brainstorm. And I was saying to a couple of my friends, oh my goodness, I think I've bitten off more than I can chew with this book, and I don't know how to do it, and I can't find Anders' voice, because the truth is, if I was a twin, I would probably not be the quiet twin. I would not be the one who doesn't talk. I would be the one who dashes into everything. And I was saying, I feel like, I've made a terrible mistake committing to this book, and I don't know what to do, and all the rest of it. And one of them looked at me and said, so you're feeling really uncertain? And I said, yes. And she said, you're you're really questioning every decision you've made. And I said, yes. And she said, much like Anders, the boy you're struggling to write. And I went, oh. And then every time I didn't know what Anders would do from then on, I'd think, oh my gosh, I'm probably not good enough to write this book. What would Anders do? There it is. So
that's so great.
Of course, he doesn't stay that way throughout the entire series. He learns a lot about himself.
All right. Well, thank you very much to everyone for the comments that are coming through. Cheryl said that your series is incredibly popular in her high school. Megan Daly has shown up with her sensational award-winning librarian comments, which we just like to share everywhere. All right. So congratulations, Rebecca Cameron. You've got the first trilogy giveaway tonight. Our second winner, drum roll please, is Jane Peterkin. Now, Jane's question actually comes from her son, who is age 10, so hi, and he would like to ask Amie if she has siblings, and if so, did you have conflict with them? He thinks he is an ice wolf and his sisters are squealing scorched dragons, which made me laugh so much.
It delighted me as well. And it was another question that I've never been asked, which I really loved. So I do have siblings. I have a big brother and a big sister and a little sister. So I'm a middle child, which I never let slow me down. And I mean, of course, you show me siblings who have never fought, and I will show you siblings who have never met.
Exactly.
You know, of course we do. I mean, I think, you fight with each other as much as you love each other. So I did. I was closest in age to my little sister. And I mean, we adore each other. We speak every single day. And when we were little kids, oh my goodness, we fought like cats and dogs. I would say when we were younger, I was much more of an ice wolf. I was cautious and steady, and I wanted to make sure that everyone was taken care of and everyone knew what was happening and everyone was okay. And she was definitely more of a scorched dragon. She was very daring and very adventurous and ready to jump into anything. And I was always like, oh, slow down. What if that goes wrong? And I mean, I think one of the nice things is that as we grew up, we both sort of taught each other. She taught me that the answer to what if that goes wrong is probably nothing very serious most of the time.
Yeah.
That something going wrong or being less than perfect is not usually a disaster. And, perhaps sometimes I slowed her down every so often. Not that much. Jill has a lot of adventures.
Pretty good. Little child, says Steph.
Oh, I don't know. No one in my family was that quiet or that forgotten.
All right. Well, congratulations to both winners who are going to receive a full set of Elementals trilogy each, thanks to HarperCollins. Please message me after the event and we'll organise to get those to you. Now, before we start on the other questions, however, we do have one more set of the Elementals trilogy to give away. And if you would like to win this set, all you have to do to enter is to tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Now, if you're only coming up as Facebook user, it would be quite helpful if you also put your name in brackets after that. I think people who are watching on phones can sometimes struggle to, to get the StreamYard permission. So if you would like to win a full set of the Elemental trilogy, then please comment to tell us where you're watching us from. You can give as much detail as you want. Like if you are folding the laundry whilst watching us, we are more than happy to hear about it. And just put your name in brackets if you're coming up as Facebook user, just so that we can that we know who you are. And yeah, if you stick around till the end, I'm going to announce the winner of that set of books at the end of the broadcast. So don't dive out yet, people. All right, because there's more to come. All right, so brace yourself, Amie, because we have a lot of questions to get through now. We're going to go through all the pre-submitted ones, and then if there's any others that come up through the comments, then we will answer those as well. So Beck Brown asks, what drew you to writing in the first place?
I have always told stories. As early as we can remember. My mum recently was going through some stuff and found stories that I had written for her, made out of little bits of paper that I had stapled together, as a small child. My earliest memory of telling stories is when I was in grade 2, when I told my entire grade 2 class that the tree in our playground was the magic faraway tree, and that every night I came to school and climbed the magic faraway tree and had adventures, and that I could see that the magic faraway tree reached all the way to the sky because I was magical and they were not. And yeah.
Of course.
I mean, this story is a lot easier to tell to Australians than it is to Americans, because Americans have generally not heard of the magic faraway tree, and the more you try to explain it, the more confused everyone becomes. Because you're like, well, it's a tree that goes all the way to the sky, and there's a whole bunch of retrospectively quite racist characters who live in the tree, and sometimes there's a world made of chocolate at the top, and yeah, it's yeah. But I would make up these stories every single day for them, and eventually got back to my teacher, and I was pulled up in front of the whole class and told to apologize for telling lies. And grade 2 Amie is up there going mortified, dying inside, going, well, I mean, what is truth really? And my teacher said, Amie, is it a magical tree or is it not a magical tree? And faced with such a binary choice, I was forced to admit it was not a magical tree. And it was pretty horrifying. And so, class went on and recess comes and we all go outside and I've got to face my class. And they're all looking at me going, it's really not the magic faraway tree. And that was the moment at which I could have hopped off the roundabout, because it had actually become quite laborious attempting to come up with like new material 5 days a week. I had locked myself into a serial format without understanding the implications of that. But they were all staring at me and I was so embarrassed to have been caught lying, and I didn't love it. So I sort of went, look, I don't know who told the teacher, but grown-ups aren't allowed to know. So I just had to lie to her. I hope you're happy. Anyway, who would like to know what I did last night? And that was, so I have been telling stories my whole life, and apparently I cannot be stopped.
I feel like you were going to go far with the storytelling no matter what you chose to do. You could have maybe politics. I'm just saying, like, I think you could have gone down that road as well.
Oh, I'm happy over here with the children's authors. Thank you.
So Sally Allen asked what your earliest memory of writing was. Would you say that that's your earliest memory?
I think it is, yeah. I think the earliest thing I can remember doing. We have things that I did before that, but the first one that I remember telling is or that I remember sharing with someone. And I think, like a lot of people, all my early stuff was ripped off from someone else. All of my early stuff was at least borrowed, if not outright stolen from.
Inspired by, shall we say.
Sincerest form of flattery. But I always think that that's interesting to me then, that you often get people telling teenage writers that fan fiction is, something they should steer away from, or it's not real writing, or it's not what they're meant to do. And I know we have a lot of questions, so I won't bang on about it, but I feel very passionately that fan fiction is a fantastic thing for writers to come through writing. I mean, I met Megan Spooner, who I've co-authored 5 and in September 6 books with, writing fan fiction. And it's where I cut my teeth. I learned about characterization. I learned about how to demonstrate world building. I learned all kinds of things writing fan fiction. And all my early stuff was cobbled together out of other people's stories, even though I didn't know the word fan fiction yet. So let me throw in there as well that in terms of early memories, and in terms of, frankly, writing when you're a grown-up, I think you can do a lot worse than practicing there.
Fair enough. So Colleen Dancer would like to know, what is your most vivid memory of English lessons in school?
Oh, gosh. I loved English lessons. I have so many memories of them. I mean, a couple that jump out are the times we got to study genre books. In year 7, we did Master of the Grove by Victor Kelleher, and I found it was the first time we'd studied anything that was sort of fantasy or science fiction, and I was very excited by it. But I think the most vivid memory that I have is, I don't know how it happened, but somehow in year 8, there was an event that was connected to the Melbourne Writers' Festival, and 2 people from my school were chosen to go, and I was one of them. I think because I read a lot of books and I could be the ice wolf still being quite strong in me, more or less trusted not to disgrace us at a public event. And so I got off school for the day, and I don't know what teacher organized this or who chose me or how it happened, but I went to this event and I saw Isabel Carmody speak and I saw Melina Marquetta speak.
Wow,
and
that's a good layout.
it blew my mind. I still remember what they talked about. Isabel talked about playing the monster game with her siblings, and Melina talked about, what it was like for her growing up as a teenager. And I sat there and I listened to them. And for the first time, I thought, hang on a minute, they're authors and they're just like me. They're people. And I think before that, I thought that, authors kind of lived on Author Island or were all dead or something. I don't know what I thought. But I remember that I came home that night and I looked at my bookshelves and I was like, hang on a minute. And that was the day I knew that I could do this too. That was it. And that's why I try so hard to connect with young readers right now, because I think that when they see that, we can be here at the start being like, Amie has published all of these books in all of these countries and all of these plaudits. But then hopefully when they see me talk and realize, actually, I'm just a giant dag and, the same as everybody else, they realize that means if I can write, they can definitely write as well. So
I think that's one of the key benefits of author visits in schools and things like that is you stand in front of them and they're like, well, poke, you're just a person.
Just a person. So yeah.
Kat Kennedy would like to know, what was the first story that you wrote that you were proud of? The first one that you wrote that you were proud of?
I think that's a really good question. I think it would be a middle grade novel called Cursed that I wrote for NaNoWriMo in 2010.
Wow.
Because it was the first one that I finished. And the difference between having finished 0 books and 1 book is so much bigger than the difference between having finished 1 book and 20 books. Once you've done it, you can do it as many times as you want to. And I don't know, I still remember, I remember the night that I finished it, like screaming in just before the NaNoWriMo deadline. And I was so excited about it. And I love that story to bits. I don't think it will ever be published, I think, because the sheer amount of renovations that would be required to render it fit for public consumption. But
maybe one day.
I'm still very proud of it.
Why do you think, why are you drawn to children's books? I mean, I know you have a huge, obviously YA section of your world. So, teens, but you also, write middle grade. What is it about writing for young people? Amie K. Perkins would like to know what it is that inspires you to write, children's books.
I mean, I read a lot of middle grade for a long time. I've always been a huge middle grade reader. I've never stopped. I've got a huge shelf of it. And which is saying something, because the shelves in our house are they go a long way. Yeah. But, so no, I'm a huge middle grade reader, and I think part of it does come back to what we were talking about before, that sense of wonder of being under the covers and just absolutely immersing myself in a world. I think that you never quite do that again the way that you do at that age, although, I try pretty hard to come close. And I think as well, it's the readers. I love middle grade readers. I think I get so many letters from young readers about my middle grade series, and a lot of them email, but gosh, a lot of them write as well. And they just send me the most beautiful art and the most beautiful letters and the most beautiful heartfelt stuff as well. And they are smart and thoughtful. And I get lovely emails from parents saying, oh, I really enjoyed co-reading this with my kid, or sometimes saying, I don't know if I'm supposed to be reading this book, but I loved it. To which I say, you can read the side of a cereal box, you can read this, you can read anything you want. Yeah, exactly. You're in the right place if you're looking for permission. But I get these brilliant emails from kids about really, really full-on stuff sometimes. So, I get emails from Rachel Craw is a New Zealand author, and she told me a really beautiful story about how when her kid was reading the book, her kid asked her, what's exile? the children in the book get threatened with exile. What's exile? And they ended up having a long conversation about what does exile mean and what is it to be sent away from your homeland and never able to return again. And those are the sorts of conversations that I hear about all the time. I get loads of emails from kids saying that they've noticed that there's a character called Jai in the books who uses they and them as their pronouns rather than he or she.
Right.
And I get loads of emails from kids they're not concerned. They're just wondering, why does Jai say they or them? What's that about? And I have a section that I send back that, I worked really hard on to make sure that it explains thoughtfully and helpfully, what, about gender and why Jai does that. And then I just love it that they, without fail, just email me back and go, oh, yeah, cool. Okay, thanks. Got it.
Yeah.
And, I just love these readers. Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. And they're just wonderful to read.
Steph has asked a question that kind of adds on to that a little bit in the sense of, do you also love, when you write middle grade like that, do you also love the fact that it puts you back in your 12-year-old self to write it?
I mean, I'm not aware that I've left her, to be honest. I think my husband and I had a moment the other day when we were dealing with our 1-year-old and we were like, we really thought we would feel more grown up before anyone put us in charge of a child. But here we are.
Yeah.
I think this may be as good as it gets in terms of feeling grown up. But I really do, Steph. I love closing my eyes and going back and being young me. It's so special. I don't know, I was going to say it's an escape, but I don't want to romanticize and say, to a simpler time or anything, because life is actually really complex when you're 12. Like life is fraught. But I don't know. It was a time I very much enjoyed, and yeah, I do enjoy going back to it.
I'm just going to take another live question in here as well. Nicole just wants to know, how did you know when you had a novel that was fit for print? Like you said, you wrote the one for NaNoWriMo, and that may never see the light of day. How did you know when you had one that was good to go?
Oh, look, I mean, the unhelpful answer is I still don't know half the time. But I think in that case, I did actually query that novel, and I did sign with my agent on that novel. But at the same time, I had also I had These Broken Stars, which was the novel that I was writing with Megan Spooner, and we decided to go out with These Broken Stars first,
right?
And because it was closer to ready. These days, I do, despite saying I have no idea, if it's any good or not. I do certainly have a stronger sense these days of whether it's working or not. Although when it's not, I still don't always know how to fix it.
Yeah.
I think the answer is if you've made it as good as you know how to get it, and if there are not sort of things in there that you sort of know are issues, but you have no idea how to fix them. And, if you run it through critique partners and they also tell you that they think it's as good as it's getting, then that's as good as it's getting. And it's time to look for an agent or a publisher with it. And it's a funny balancing act, because on one hand, you do not want to do 95% of the work and then not get there for the want of doing the extra 5%, which is an incredibly common thing you see. That people, they just get to the point where they're just tired and they're done, and surely it's good enough. But you can never rely on anybody to see how good it could be. You can never, you can't say, oh, it's really good after the first 50 pages. It has to be good straight away. But you also don't want to end up, spending years and years and years making it better and never actually doing anything with it. So it's a balancing act. I think if you surround yourself with a few good writers, and then I don't mean necessarily published writers, I just mean people who will support you and help you out, they'll push you off the fence when it's time.
All right. So Francesca Peel would like to know, who is your inspiration? What sparked the Elemental story? Like what set you off down that road?
That's a really good question. So it was sort of a coming together of a bunch of things that I'm really interested in. I envy authors who say that they had, one brilliant moment when, they woke from a dream and the whole thing came together, because that has never happened to me. But usually what happens is I sort of start with one or two things that I really like, and then I sort of cast through my nets of all of the things that I love and just slowly start hooking other things on. So, it sort of becomes, I'm really interested in sibling dynamics and twin dynamics. And, I'm interested in magic and I'm interested in shapeshifters. Oh, so what happens if you get twins and something about the shapeshifting puts them at odds? That's interesting. And then, what could that be? What could you shapeshift into that would be interesting and different? What's two things that don't seem automatically like they would go together? What's not cats and dogs? And, what's not cats and mice, and, a really obvious pairing. And it just slowly, bit by bit, begins to come together. And, then I sort of began to realize that I've always been obsessed with the Icelandic landscape. I just think it's incredible. And looking at pictures, I thought, yeah, this is the sort of landscape I want it to be set in. And so then, you start reading stories and sort of getting into the headspace. And, and I went there and spent weeks touring around in a camper van and basically pretending we were the famous five. Just, every evening we were, Anne, don't you think that food always tastes twice as good eaten outdoors? And, it was fantastic. But slowly, just bit by bit, little things latch on and you begin to see the shape of it more and more. It's, as I say, I really envy the people who in a blinding flash, they know their story. I build mine brick by brick by brick.
Okay, so, Alison Myers would like to know how long that takes you, in the sense of how long did it take from that first spark of an idea for the series to the first book actually being published?
Good. So usually, this one's a little bit different. Usually, I would say from the time that I sell it to my publisher to publication is usually 2 years. And usually I would, these days, work on it for maybe 3 to 6 months before I sell it to my publisher. But that's because, having written a lot of books now, they know that I can definitely finish one, which means that they don't require me to write the whole book before I sell it to them. I can show them, a part of the book and say, this is what it's going to be like. This is the sort of thing it will be. And they'll buy it based on that. Back when I was starting, I definitely had to write the whole book because, well, it's a lot easier to start a book than to finish it. So at the start, I really want to be sure that you can finish it. With this series, I had been wanting to write middle grade for a while. I'd been wanting to write fantasy for a while, and sort of these ideas were swirling around. And my editor, who I absolutely adored, who edited These Broken Stars, had moved to Harper and was looking. And we'd always said to each other, one day we'll do something together. And she had room for a middle grade fantasy, and so she got in touch. And I mean, this is what dreams are made of. This never happens. Wow. And got in touch and said, are you still thinking about doing one? And I was like, I would think about writing a technical manual if you were editing it. I just thought she was wonderful, and still do think she's wonderful. And so, we sort of talked together about, here are the ideas and what would work, and brainstormed. And so this one took a slightly unusual path, and I was so lucky to get to do it that way. That has not happened before or since. I don't imagine it will ever happen again.
Okay, so it's actually Alison's daughter Emma, who's nearly 10, who asked the question, and she has a second part to the question. She wants to know, how do you keep the spark of your initial idea going, over all of that time and all of those books, because there's a lot of writing between this is a great idea and here's the finished book.
That's a really good question, because it's really hard, because even something you really, really love, you must have the same experience yourself, Allison, with your series. No matter how much you love it, there are days when it is hard work. You just don't feel like, you're going in the right direction, or you don't know how to make it better, or you don't know what should happen next. And I do tend to think that if at some point during the whole process you don't think, oh no, I've suddenly realized that this is terrible and I'm terrible and everything's terrible, then you're probably not pushing yourself. You're probably doing something that's a bit safe. You should feel that strain. But I have a whole bunch of stuff that I do. I have like private little Pinterest boards, so that are full of the pictures that sort of fill me up with the feeling of the book, so that I can go and look at it and get excited about these pictures of the sort of things that I'm imagining. Often I have pictures pinned for something that might not. I have something that happened in book 3 that I knew about from the very, very start, and I had been excited to write it. I also try and make sure that I know what excites me about the book, so I know what are going to be the scenes that are going to be really amazing, or what are going to be the moments that really light me on fire, so that I'm running towards them. Because if I'm really bored while I'm writing it, you're probably going to be really bored
Yes, so true, so true. So just on that, Tanya Clark has sent us a live question. Her daughter wants to ask, how do you come up with great endings? Because endings can be hard.
Endings can be hard. Endings
Or
are
endings are really hard.
always really hard. I think endings
really
are hard. I think endings are really hard. I think there's a bunch of questions you can ask yourself. So I think you can ask yourself, what have they given up to get to this ending? Because it can't just come easily. Everyone has to give something up if they're going to win. And you can ask yourself, what have they learned and how have they changed? And I think if you start asking yourself, where were the characters when they began and where are the characters when they end, that begins to tell you about what sort of ending you need to have. Because I'm not gonna spoil anyone about what happens in Battleborn, but it's I had to think, like, is this going to be an ending? Is it going to be a battle, or is it if it's going to be some other kind of ending? Then how do I make it feel dramatic, and how do I make it feel like it's been earned?
Yeah.
So I think the answer is that the way you come up with great endings is if you think about the story sort of going like this. We start out and, things get bigger and bigger and more intense, and then eventually they draw to a close. What needs to happen all the way along this curve? And if you get that right, then this bit becomes obvious.
Yeah. Okay. Good answer. I'm going to remember that when my next ending comes along.
Oh, it's real. If only I could remember it when my endings come along. It's really hard.
All right. Now, I've got some elemental sorts of questions here that I've all grouped together. Kylie Price would like to know which element you relate to most personally. Which one most reflects your personality today?
Today, that's really tricky. I definitely used to be an ice wolf. And I think probably there is still more of the ice wolf in me, just because I am very much, is everyone okay? Has everyone got a sandwich? Has everyone been taken care of? I'm very much about, taking care of everyone in harmony and sort of, being very inclusive. But the Scorched Dragons are the artists of this world, and here I am. So, I guess a little of both. And I have just finished writing a series about how there's a little bit of everything in all of us. So there's a little bit of everything in me, but maybe a little more ice wolfy right now, I think.
All right. Kate Justelius Wright would like to know, if you could shapeshift into any animal in the whole world, which one would you choose and why?
That's a really good question. It sort of reminds me of the time I got asked on stage, sitting beside an author, Kate Elliott, who I just deeply admire. I grew up reading her stuff, and someone said, if you could turn yourself into any character from a book, who would you be? And without missing a beat, I just didn't think. I just said, the very hungry caterpillar. Because she spends the whole book eating. And then I thought, I've just said that in front of one of my heroes, but it turned out to be the moment we became friends.
I like it.
So that was,
it's the hero's journey.
Right? Part of me wants to say, I would shapeshift into the very hungry caterpillar, because I would spend my entire story eating. But I have always wanted to fly so much. So I think I would probably a dragon, I think. But yeah, I would definitely, turn myself into something that could fly, or maybe a dolphin, because I think they sort of probably feel like they're flying, but also they get to go some pretty cool places.
They do get to have a lot of fun when they're doing that surfing in the waves thing.
They look like they're having a lot of fun, right? And as like a deeply uncoordinated person who will never surf as long as she lives, I think that the dolphins do look very fun.
Okay. All right. Well, Lara Kathleen and Steph Gemmell have quite similar questions, and you might have already just really answered that in a way, where the questions are, if you could choose, Lara says, if you could choose what you choose, would you want to transform into an ice wolf or a scorched dragon? And Steph says, my son Oscar wants to know if you are a secret scorched dragon or ice wolf. So I'm getting that you would actually want to be a dragon, personally.
Yeah, it's funny. I sort of would want to be a dragon so I could fly, but I think I might turn up as a wolf. And I can see in the comments, I can see Colleen talking about Anne McCaffrey's dragons, and I think anyone who reads my dragons and has read Anne McCaffrey's books will see plenty of resemblance. I grew up reading Anne McCaffrey. It was writing Anne McCaffrey fan fiction that I met Megan Spooner. So yep, my love of dragons came straight from her Dragon Riders of Pern series.
There you go. Okay, so Candace Lemon Scott once says her daughter would like to know why. So I'm not sure if we've really touched on this. Like, why the wolf and the dragon? Like, how did you come up with those two particular things? And Yvonne Chang says, "Hi, Amie. My 9-year-old daughter wants to know: have you seen a real wolf? And is that part of the inspiration for the novel?"
Yeah, so I have seen a real wolf, but not until after I chose wolves. So.
Okay.
Once I decided it was going to be that wolves were going to be one of them, I was in the United States on tour, and I went to a wolf sanctuary to do research. And there are some that will let you actually meet the wolves, but the thing is, that's good for you. It's not good for the wolves. They're meant to be wild animals.
Yeah.
They're not meant to be, put into a situation where they can interact with people. So instead, in this, it's basically like you're in the cage at this sanctuary instead. And we met their ambassador wolf, who only just passed away recently. He was awesome. He was called Atka, and we just went and we sat down by his fence. And his enclosure was huge, so he could have been out of sight of us anytime he wanted to. And I mean, by huge, I mean like acres. But he came up to the fence, and he walked up and down in front of us, and he interacted with us a little. And when we walked up and down, he followed, and he sort of looked, went away for a while. He came back. It was very much on his terms. And the one of the people who ran the sanctuary talked to us about, what his little movements meant, and what that flick of the ear was, and so on. So I tried to really capture a lot of that and get it into the book. And I thank them in the acknowledgements because they were so wonderful. And visiting the Dragon Sanctuary was also fantastic. I really.
Do you know, I'm slightly stuck on the whole concept of the ambassador wolf. I'm loving.
Oh, so because they have a whole bunch of wolves who don't ever meet the public.
Yeah,
but didn't mind people, so he was one of their wolf ambassadors.
I can see him out the back in his purple robe. Like.
Yeah, I mean, he knew he was royalty. That much was for sure. It was great. But I mean, I guess wolves. Sorry, I mean, there was a bit about sort of why did I choose wolves and dragons, and I chose because for me they are, they on first look, wolves are like really about loyalty and pack, and everyone acting together. And when wolves all howl together, which is called rallying, it makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck because they're all blending together. But when you actually start to learn about packs of wolves, there's an extremely clear hierarchy, and some of the wolves in that pack do not have a good time. The wolves that are at the bottom of the hierarchy, really can get picked on quite badly. And I thought that was really interesting, this idea of a pack that outwardly appears to be very cohesive, and inwardly maybe it's not quite as cohesive as you would think. And dragons were because I just love dragons. I just think they're well, and I think that they're also the idea of, once I figured out that there could be dragonsmiths who forge their own artifacts with their own fire. That was too cool to go past.
Well, you can't go past that. No,
I'll get in anyway.
So Emma Beckley has had a questioning from her daughter. How do you incorporate natural elements into your stories? Do you draw from personal experiences? I guess going to Iceland and actually experiencing that environment, in your tent or camper van would have helped with that.
Yeah, enormously. Yeah, and it's often funny that I think when I go places, I probably look at very different details to what everyone else looks at. I still remember this one moment on holiday in Japan when everyone else was looking out across this beautiful valley taking a photo, and I suddenly realized that they were all facing that way and I was facing the other way, just taking a close-up photo of this really cool rusty keyhole in a gate. I just thought a really cool detail. I was like, I'll use that somewhere. I want to make sure I remember that I saw it, so I'll take a picture. And that was the moment I thought, oh, you just don't quite, you don't quite see things the same way, do you? But so, yeah, I mean, going to the place is great, but I have also written about a lot of places I haven't been to. So I don't want to make it sound like, you have to go to Iceland in order to do it. that was amazing, but it was also something, that I got to do a dozen books in, and that I would have been okay if I hadn't as well.
Yeah.
You can do so much just by watching documentaries and by reading books about it and by sort of finding pictures. There's, and that's how I do most of my research. So, a lot of my stuff is in space. I have not yet successfully been to space, so it's amazing what you can do just with your imagination and some resource picks.
Not yet. All right, Jodie Warner would like to know, what is your favourite question to receive from readers?
Oh gosh, I don't know that I have one, to be honest. What I really enjoy is being asked questions from people like the ones we're doing tonight that are really sort of about the book, that we're really, that allow me to talk about it without having to spoil everyone, about what's going on. But I think people often say, like, what's your favorite part of the job? And you feel like you're sort of, being a bit of a suck, but like, honestly, it's like getting to meet readers.
Yeah.
Because I think it was Stephen King who said that writing is the closest that we're ever going to get to telepathy. Because if I have this idea in my head and I can write it down sufficiently well, then I can get it into your head. And we're in the same imaginary place with the same imaginary people, having the same moment, feeling the same feelings. Like, that's telepathy.
Yeah.
And I really love getting to hang out with a group of readers and talk about somewhere that we've all been together, whether it's my book or somebody else's book. But I love that. I love being in fandom together.
Now, we've got a question here from Rebecca Griffiths from her 10-year-old, and I feel like it might be a spoilery one, so I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer this one. Will Anders and Anna find their mother?
You will have to read Battleborn to find out.
I knew you would say that.
Yeah.
All right. So, now,
I've
got a few questions here about characters, so we're going to work through those now. So Vicky Lorimer says, we are learning about characterization at school at the moment, and I wonder, how do you keep track of everyone and give them such unique characteristics and circumstances? How do you keep track of them, Amie?
It's quite tricky. Generally, what you need to do, I think, at the very start is think to yourself, what's different about this person to the other people who are in the book? So, does this person, did they grow up poorer than everybody in the book? Or did they grow up in a different place to everybody in the book? Or, what is different about them? Did they grow up with lots of siblings or no siblings? Or did they grow up with their parents pressuring them to get an A+, or did they grow up with parents who didn't care what they did? But what's different about them? And then how does that impact on how they see the world? And once you know how they see the world, they're going to feel like a different point of view, because they're going to make different choices and they're going to think different things are important. And I will embarrass you. I was just pausing, debating whether I would or not, but I am lucky enough to have read Allison's next book that will be coming out. And then she didn't know that I was going to do this, so she is going to be embarrassed now. But one of the things I thought, there were a lot of things I thought were amazing about it, which is why I wrote her this giant email in all caps that just screamed at her. But one of the two characters are Raven and Reeve. No, they're not, Amie. Other way around. Raven and Reeve. But they've come from completely different backgrounds, and they've had different life experiences, and so they think different things are very important, and that causes them often to make quite different choices or want quite different things. And even when they do want the same thing, they want it for quite different reasons. And I think what it comes down to is where have they come from, because that tells you where they're going. So I think that's how you, whether it's 2 or 10, I think that's how you make them different.
Well, thank you very much for that. I am embarrassed, but I'm extremely, chuffed and humbled as well. So thank you. So Carla Alima.
Mhm.
has asked, what influenced you? Like, how did you come up with the names of the places and the people? Like naming characters. Personally, naming kingdoms is like my least favorite thing ever to do. Naming characters, I'm all right with, but how do you come up with those names?
A mix of different ways. Some of them I sort of started with languages like, Icelandic or Danish, and like then twisted them a lot. So, perhaps I'd look for, the word for south or the word for tall or something like that. And then I would change some letters in it, because I find that giving them a common root can help them all feel a little bit similar, like they're sort of from
Yeah.
the same place.
Yes.
But when it comes to characters, I definitely, I don't know, do you feel like you sort of just have a sense of like, oh, this is an M character, or this is, because the different letters have different personalities for me. And so I sort of know which, I think the first time I said that out loud, I got blank looks, but I found more and more people who think that different letters have different personalities.
You
So
want yeah, there's a certain sound that you want associated with that particular character, so you're looking for a name that's gonna yeah, no, I understand what you're
yeah,
saying.
exactly. And I mean, if you look at the map in the front of the book, you'll also see a bunch of landmarks that I named after the friends who did the first critique read of the book. So Port Alcher is named after my friend Allison Cherry, who's an author who I love her stuff, and she was very helpful. Lena's Pass and Port Tylid are named after the friends that my husband and I travelled all around Iceland with. So there's a whole bunch of the Click
Experience.
waterfall is named after my sister. So yeah, there's after my dragon sister. So who is also an amazing horticulturalist and landscape architect and all things green. So we encounter a historical dragon called Flick, who was really great with plants, and that's so. I like to put little shout outs in, but also a lot of it comes from language roots.
Yeah, okay. Carla's daughter Chloe, who's 9, would like to know if you have a favorite character.
Oh man, Chloe, that's really hard. I sort of like Zacharias a lot. He's not a major character, but he's always thinking about food. That's me. That's my voice
He's
coming
very
through.
hungry caterpillar.
He's always like, "Cool plan, guys. I don't see a lunch break built anywhere in here." And he always thinks 2 pies are better than 1 pie. And are you eating that dessert? So I have a pretty soft spot for Zacharias, but I mean, I like all of them because I've spent so much time in their heads.
Okay. So this is an interesting question. I'm not sure where you're going to go with this one, but Callie Tierney would like to know, hi Amy,
Mhm.
do you have a clue or a riddle to help us work out your favourite character or part of the story?
Well, I've told you my favorite character, but let me think.
What's your favourite part of the story?
What can I
Riddle.
tell you about the stories that if you have read them, you will know what I mean? Um, I think one of my, oh gosh, there's so many. Um, Actually, I think my very favorite part of the stories is the very end of Battleborn.
Okay.
Not much of a riddle, but
Not much of a riddle.
when I worked out what was gonna happen in that little epilogue, the whole thing just came together and came to life.
Yeah.
That was what I knew.
Such a good feeling that, isn't it? When you have
Oh,
that moment of, oh, yes, that's what's
such
going to
a relief, such a relief.
happen.
Yeah.
Well, here's a question for you. Sally
Mhm.
Harvey says, question from her 13-year-old, if you could enter the universe of one of your stories and
Mhm.
kill one of the characters, which would be I know, which
Right.
would be the most satisfying to end?
Alright, well, let me begin by saying I do not condone
No,
violence,
of course.
despite the many deaths in my books. Um, I mean, I do think that if I could hop into Illuminae and I don't want to spoil anyone, but kill the person who orders the initial attack. We do know by the end of the series who that is. I would certainly save everybody a lot of trouble. I would certainly save everybody a lot of Yeah, I would certainly save everybody a lot of angst. But in this book, there's no one that I would want to lose, because even the people who aren't very admirable have things that they have to learn, have a journey they have to go on in this book, and I wouldn't want to deny them the end of the journey.
Okay. Good answer. Nice and very good. All right. So now I've got some general questions. We're going to have to move on because we're going to have to close up very soon. But I'll just ask a few more of these more general sort of writing questions.
I'll try and be quick.
So let me just see what I've got here. Because we have covered a lot of these. We've talked about where your ideas come from. We've talked about whether you use your own experiences to influence your writing. We talked about the sort of books that you read as a child and how they, probably fed into your writing style and genre. Hanani Nasser says, nobody panic. What is the hardest thing about co-writing a book? Because you do co-author quite a lot.
I do, yeah. I have 3 different co-authors. Oh, gosh. I don't know. It's great. There's really not a hardest thing. The great thing about co-authoring is when you're stuck, the other person's not. And when you think that your chapter's not very good and maybe you're not very good and maybe you should quit and, go and become a greenkeeper instead, you still think the other person is good. So you never have that moment of thinking you should chuck the whole book.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely great. I would say, if there's a hard bit, maybe it's sometimes when I'm feeling a bit stuck on a chapter and I know that I said I would get it to them by Thursday and I've got to send that email that's like, oh, it's going to be Monday at best. And I sort of got to be stuck. But we all do that. So it's not, you might not feel great sending it, but they never get cross. You never feel judged. You just, feel slightly yourself. But no, it's great. I love it. That's why I keep doing it.
All right. Well, on that, John Bowman would like to, this is the exact question. Are you ready? Jay Christoph, give us the lowdown. What is his most annoying author trait that drives you nuts? Bad speller, awful punctuation? Give us the goss. We're not going to defame anyone here.
Oh, there's nothing low down about Jay Christoph. The man is 6'7".
He's enormous.
I would say his most annoying trait, and I have said this in front of him many times, so it's no secret, is that sometimes you ask him something and he just sits there completely staring into space and doesn't twitch and doesn't move and doesn't answer. And after a while, you begin to think, I thought that you were thinking about what I asked, and now I'm not sure if you've just gone to another place. And so I don't know if I should ask my question again or if I should, poke you to see if you're alive or what I should do. And it never gets any easier to tell. And I still remember the first time I said this to Jay's wife. And she was like, at last somebody knows what it's like. Just stares into space for minutes at a time. And usually if you go, did you hear you thinking about it? He'll go, oh, yeah, right, and start discussing it. But, yeah, he just sort of glitches or something. So it's also quite funny, to be honest. I usually use that time to go make tea or get a snack or something. So, it works for me.
That's not so bad. Liz Laidlaw.
You've got to be, I think, I think it actually would be awful if it wasn't a really close friendship and you didn't really, want to take care of each other.
Yeah, definitely. All right. From Liz Laidlaw, from her daughter Jamie, she loves the covers of the books. Which one is your favourite? And how much say do you have in what they look like?
Different amounts of say for different books, but I'm lucky in that I adore every single cover I've ever had. I don't know what I did in a past life, but it paid off. With these ones, they asked me what sort of covers I thought would be good, and I sent in a whole bunch. And then they did something that was nothing like any of them, and I loved it. So that was fortunate. But I can't take a lot of credit because I didn't design them. I didn't choose what went on them. But what I did do was discuss with my editor which characters should be on it and what should those characters look like and so on. Because, for instance, from book 2 onwards, we have a character called Aluka. And the artist hadn't read the book yet because the book didn't exist yet. And so he drew her looking as skinny as Raina and Elizabeth. And Aluka is not at all as skinny as Raina and Elizabeth. And it was really important to me that, that she looked the size that she is on the cover of the book, because I can't think of anything worse than reading something and thinking, oh, someone who weighs more like I do, and then you look at the cover and, you know, they've
And then
been
it's not that.
airbrushed or something. And I mean, it was literally just a case of the artist hadn't read a book that wasn't yet written. So, you know, fair play, he's good, he's not psychic. But, you know, we did go back and forth about that stuff and make sure that we got it right. So although I didn't choose, you know, the artist or the design, and I wouldn't want to, because I'm actually, visual stuff's not my talent. I think whatever, I would not come up with something as good as the designers and artists. But I did get very involved in making sure that the characters looked right.
Excellent. All right, the last question we have tonight before we wrap up is somewhere which I've lost. It's going so well. Melissa Barry, she has a daughter who has a love of writing. What would your advice be for a young writer who aspires to become an author one day? What's your best number one piece of advice for a young writer?
My number one piece of advice for a young writer is to do a lot of reading, and not just of one type of book, because J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote The Hobbit and, you know, a few other things you may have heard of, had this fantastic thing that he said about creative compost, that everything that you take in, you know, places you go and books you read and music you listen to and conversations you have, all falls to your mental forest floor, and the stories that you tell grow out of that creative compost.
It's beautiful. That's a lovely image.
Yeah, and so if you just put in one kind of thing, you are going to grow one kind of plant. But if you read scary stories to learn how to make things feel suspenseful, and if you read romances to learn about, you know, how to write relationships, and, you know, if you read nonfiction to learn about, you know, facts and places you never could have imagined that are way weirder than anything you could have made up, the more stuff that you read, the more it all comes together, you know, the more interesting your stuff will be. So that's something you can do without leaving home. You know, all you need is the library. So
perfect. Fantastic advice. Well done. All right, that's all we have time for tonight, everybody. Thank you all for coming along to the very first Your Kids Next Read author talk. I know, like, what a stellar first guest. I can't believe how lucky we are.
All downhill from here. No, seriously though, thank you so much for having me, because I love these books to pieces, and I don't always get to talk about my middle grade. I often talk about my YA instead, and it's such a pleasure to get to talk about my middle grade. I've really enjoyed it.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here to talk about your middle grade. Now, before you go, I'm going to say, first of all, a little shout out to Jess Neville, who doesn't need the books because she has the first two, but she's in Melbourne and she's crocheting dishcloths, which I just thought deserved a shout out in the competition to win the last set. But the actual winner is of the last set of the Elementals trilogy, thanks to HarperCollins, is Steph Gemmell, because she is kegging a homebrew IPA while watching this in her dressing gown and slippers, and I don't know, that just sounds like the perfect setup to me. I can't think of anything.
I don't know about you. Steph is living my best life.
She really is. So well done. Thank you so much. If you can send me a message, Steph, and I'll make sure that the books get out to you. Lastly, before we go, where can our members go to find out more about you and to buy your books? I mean, obviously, like, you know, we would love everyone to pop out and get themselves a copy of the Elemental series.
Absolutely.
Where do they go?
Copies. I mean, everything you need is at amiekaufman.com, which is my website. And most importantly, what you can do there is sign up for my newsletter. And so that I send that out whenever I have a new release. And I also do a lot of behind the scenes stuff. So if this conversation has been interesting, that's where I talk a lot about how things get made and what goes into creating a book. And I write it jointly with Megan Spooner, one of my co-authors. And we also give stuff away each month. You can find me on social media, but social media is a place at the moment. So, you know, you're my favorite on that one. Yeah, my website, my newsletter, I think is probably the best place to.
Fantastic. And I'll put the link in the comments at the end. So thanks, everyone. Thank you to my wonderful co-hosts of the Your Kids Next Read group, to Allison Rushby and Megan Daly, who have been in the comments wrangling, have helped us to promote. It's such a pleasure for us all to be part of this group and to have Amie with us tonight. And so best of luck with the series, and thank you and farewell, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.